while inside emoji, yo, you got it.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Tinted Visors podcast, episode 10 of our second season. Coming at you guys with some recaps, some storylines so far through this season, and then we're going to get into some coaches on the hot seat. But, a lot of content for you guys today, and we're going to get things going. Starting with the recaps of the past week, Florida and Vegas are staying hot, still at number one in their division. One of the teams we want to talk about was Colorado. Talked about it a bit last week, but they're still playing at 500 hockey. At what point do you kind of, blow things up, make a big move?
I don't think there's any immediate rush to make a move here. We talked about it last week. The forward core was pretty banged up, and they're starting to kind of get back into their groove. They got Lehkonen back. They got Nichushkin back. So I think just give this offense a little bit of time to get their legs under them and get going again. And I think, this team is built to win. We talk about that core, very top-heavy. So you're always going to be looking to make a move come closer to the deadline.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe bringing in someone is kind of, what they need to do here, because at this point you're sitting outside the playoffs, and that top three in the Central of Winnipeg, Minnesota, and Dallas, they all seem very solid. So, if you're trying to break into that top three, something's got to change. Like you said, maybe getting some of those players back will be the change that they need, but getting a little concerning for me personally, looking at Colorado, but we'll see what they do and we'll see if they make any changes. Another team for me, Detroit, sitting at 7-9-1. You guys are planning. Is it cooked? Is it over? What do you think?
It's tough. This team, the young core, they look great. They made those free agent moves a couple seasons back, bringing guys like JT Compher, Andrew Kopp, to try and accelerate it, and it hasn't really worked. You have some stars up front, led by Dylan Larkin and Alex DeBrincat. Then you have a good mix of depth veteran guys, Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, who knows what it takes to win. But something's just not clicking with this Detroit team. It might be the defense, Kenny, but what are your thoughts? Do you think the guys' plan is cooked, or what are we looking at?
I think it's about run its course. I think he's got maybe one more season to go in Detroit. Like you said, those free agent signings a couple years ago, it got in the way of the progression of the young players. You got like you said, JT Compher, Andrew Kopp getting in the way of, a Marco Kasper trying to break up, or, Ben Sherratt getting in the way of Edmondson a couple years ago. And those are big contracts too, and they've got terms, so it's a little hard to sort of get out of that. But defense is their big problem. They got a really good offensive core, but yeah, defense needs to change. Goaltending, not a problem this year for them. Cam Talbot, he's sporting some really good numbers. He's got a .927 save percentage. Is he your starter for Team Canada at this point? You said go with the hot goalie last week with Sweden. Is Cam Talbot the starter?
Yeah, it feels like we're going to be talking about these Canadian goalies every week from here on out. But, if the tournament started today, he's got to be at least, a mention with how weak those Canadian goalies have been. I think he's got to be at least on the roster. But it's really going to come down to who's hot. And, I'm looking forward to seeing who Team Canada decides to take to this tournament.
Yeah, obviously small sample size, but at this point, the 37-year-old goalie could potentially be our starter. Who knows? Going over to Carolina, second in the league, ahead of some big teams, and Freddie Anderson, the goaltender, has been out for a while, and it seems like it's going to be out for a long time from now. But they're kind of surprising me at this point with how good they are.
Yeah, we talked about all the pieces they lost in the offseason, and we were expecting a fall off. We both had them in the playoffs, but just a little lower than what they've been in past years, and proven everybody wrong. And Martin Necas has been red hot as of late on a crazy point streak. Ever since he dyed his hair blonde, he lost a bet. He's been going absolutely crazy. So yeah, shout out Marty Necas. The 25-year-old's having a great year.
They're sporting a goalie tandem of Kochetkov and I think it's Spencer Martin at this point. Yeah. Is that sustainable? Do you think they got to go out and pick up a goalie at this point?
I think Kochetkov could be the answer between the pipes. He is a bit young compared to this Carolina core and, where they're at with wanting to win now. But yeah, I would look to bring in a goalie closer to the deadline. I don't think Spencer Martin is an NHL caliber backup. He did get a shutout in last night's game, so props to him for that. The Canucks legend doing some good over in Carolina. But yeah, I just don't think he is an NHL backup goalie.
I think, offense, defense, they've got it all. I think if they could just figure out the goaltending, bring in someone maybe a little more with a bit bigger resume, bigger reputation could be the answer for them.
And the last bit of the recaps in the West, the two wildcard spots. Two Pacific teams, a little bit surprising. The Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames. Seemingly two teams, kind of going in different directions. Kenny, what do you think of the two Alberta teams so far this year?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a tale of two stories. Calgary's kind of surprising everyone, and Edmonton's kind of disappointing everyone. Edmonton's on their way up, so I think that's good. And I could see them. I'd like to say they could crack into that top three, but so far Vegas, LA, and Vancouver have all been very solid, so it looks kind of hard for them. I do see Calgary on the downfall. I think they had a very surprising and very good start to the season, but we all kind of knew it wasn't really sustainable. So it's one team, while they are surprising us, they are on the downfall, and then the other team, while they are disappointing us, they are on the kind of sort of the come up. And I would say in a couple weeks from now, I would probably put Edmonton in the top three and Calgary falling out of that wildcard spot.
Yeah, you mentioned those top three teams in the Pacific. LA, being very solid. We're waiting for them to kind of, fall off from that first round exit they've been the past few years. But yeah, they've looked really solid, and it's still very early, very small sample size, almost a quarter of the way through the season. But if Edmonton isn't able to crack into that top three, that is easily one of the scarier wildcard teams we have seen.
Going to our next piece of business, it is non-order, so I'm going to kind of surprise you.
Okay, here we go.
But it is the biggest storyline. I mean, McDavid hit 1,000 points earlier this week, fourth fastest to do it, fourth youngest to do it. Quick shout out to Mike Bossy. I didn't realize he was the third fastest to do it, and I kind of wonder how many points he could have gotten if he had a full career. But talk about McDavid, fitting that Draisaitl got the assist for that 1,000th point.
And it's a treat to get to watch him play and watch him play through his prime on a semi-competitive Oiler team. But yeah, it's been great, honestly. We got to see Crosby as kids, Crosby, Ovechkin, and growing up, you get to watch McDavid, and hopefully in the coming years, we'll get to watch Bedard. But it's super special just watching them play, and when you go to a game, when you go to a Canucks game and they're playing the Oilers, and you see McDavid in person, it's just different. Watching him skate, watching him shoot the puck, and it's a treat to watch, and very happy to be able to see him in his prime. But Kenny, do you rank him based on his career trajectory here? What does he have to do to be considered better than Sidney Crosby?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that. It's a tough question. It really is. Mostly because Crosby had those injuries early in his career. So who knows how fast he could have done it if he was fully healthy for the majority of his prime. But I mean, Crosby, he's got that Olympic medal. He's got those 3 cups. Conn Smythes. It would have to take multiple Stanley Cups, I think, for me, for McDavid to be over Crosby at this point. And then, even if they do, share a gold medal at the next Olympics, at least McDavid gets one. And I think that's what he needs as well. I think overall, McDavid will end up with more points than Crosby, just how consistent he's been, and just, again, the health-wise part of it. I think McDavid, hasn't missed too much time, I think last season aside. But yeah, I think it's got to be at least 2 cups, a gold medal. He's already got 1 Conn Smythe, so I don't know if that's any sort of consolation prize for him. But yeah, it's going to need a lot more for me to put him over Sidney Crosby at this point.
Yeah, I think he definitely will have more points than Crosby at the end of their careers, just from a points perspective. But the accolades that Crosby has, I think it's going to be very tough for McDavid to touch Crosby between his gold medals, his Stanley Cups. It's going to be tough. So yeah, I think I would have to agree with you, multiple Stanley Cups for sure to be even in that conversation.
Going over to our next piece of business, the Capitals' success. I'm going to milk this because I called it at the start of the season. I'm going to keep bringing it up. But the only thing I wanted to touch on was just, if they make it into the playoffs and they can add, Ryan Leonard to that forward core and potentially even Andrew Cristall to that forward core, they're going to be, that's basically like a trade deadline acquisition right there. They're bringing in 2 really solid pieces. And I mean, that I could see them going to second, maybe not third round, but at least winning winning the first round.
Adding 2 young guys like that, no experience, whatever, they get thrown in for what they get added, make their debut in the playoffs?
I wouldn't say they're the difference makers.
Okay. Would you trust the guys that got you there to the playoffs, or do you trust a couple rookies with a lot of talent, top 6 minutes? Where would you slot them in on the bottom 6 to start?
Start in the bottom 6. I don't know if I would put both of them in every game together, maybe sort of swapping them in and out. I think Ryan Leonard is more likely to play at this point than Cristall. But I think, even just having that sort of jump in your step, that sort of youth in that lineup, I think can be huge for them. And again, not to say that they're going to be the difference makers in the first round, but with him added to that lineup and with the how they're doing so well so early in the season, I think they are a second round contention team.
It would be a huge addition for this Capital team who have started to buy. They traded for Lars Eller about a few days back. But yeah, excited to watch this Capitals hockey. Was not expecting this. I know you kind of called this success, but it was definitely not expecting this out of the Capitals.
Looking at the flip side of that Eller trade, is this signs of more to come for Pittsburgh? Are they starting to sell? I know Malkin said he wants to stay no matter what they do, and I assume they're going to keep Crosby, but can you see more players on the move? I heard maybe Carlson buyout. I don't even know if that's how much there is behind that.
Feels like the beginning of an end for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Dubas has come out and said that everyone but Crosby is available. So I think there will be some teams calling regarding maybe a guy like Marcus Pettersson to add for a playoff run. Very similar to Matthias Ekholm a few years back, who was dealt to the Oilers. I think he could get them a solid haul. But yeah, I think the Pens are going to be sellers come closer to the deadline. It's just, what do they have to sell? They have Pettersson, like we said, but other than that, it's just, they got a bunch of old guys who, could be added to a playoff team, but I don't think they'll be able to return much. The Pens are kind of forced their hand here. It'll be interesting to see what they decide to do.
You get roster pieces back, so you could try to run it back next year, or are you going for full rebuild, first rounders? You want, prospects, all that?
Yeah, I'd like to see them rebuild, but until Crosby retires, I can't see them rebuilding, and I don't think they will. Props to them for trying to stay competitive, but I just don't think it's possible. With how strong the East is, and the Metro especially, I don't think there's any avenue for them making the playoffs in the next, 2-3 seasons. So I think they need to rebuild, but we'll see what they decide to do.
Going to another storyline, we're going to go with the Tampa Bay Lightning, sitting third in the division, looking really good so far. I think a big, sort of factor to them being so high in that division is, the Bruins kind of downfall right now, and then that big three of Detroit, Ottawa, and Buffalo just continuing to suck. But, Tampa, there's a lot of questions going into this season, trading Sergachev, letting Stamkos go, and then bringing in Jake Gensel and bringing in some depth pieces. I think it's kind of working so far, at least. Kucherov's having another insane year. Vasilevsky seems like he's sort of bouncing back, and Hedman as captain has shown that he is, still got that offensive step in him. A lot more depth scoring compared to last year. I think for me personally, watching their games, Nick Paul having a great season. Do I think letting Stamkos go was the right decision? Still no, looking back. If they could have him still with that team, with Gensel, with everyone else they have, if they could have made it work, then I would have loved to see that happen.
They've done a great job. They were in a tough spot with the Stamkos situation, and at the time, letting him walk was a bit questionable. But strictly from a number standpoint, if it was really Stamkos or Gensel, I think they've definitely made the right decision, bringing in Gensel, as we're seeing Stamkos struggling a bit, getting settled in Nashville. But yeah, the depth, like you said, is showing up. Braden Point is out right now with an injury, and Anthony Cirelli stepping up onto that first line, and he's played great. Great two-way guy. Tampa's depth is showing, and this is vintage Tampa we're seeing. We're looking at 2020, 2021 Tampa. Vazzy's coming back. This team could be very dangerous in April.
Yeah, and obviously it was tough to see Sergachev go, but that return of Connor Geekie and JJ Moser, both guys have been really good depth pieces. Geekie taking sort of slower route, but he's sort of finding the back of the net now. And JJ Moser's been solid all year long, has a great plus-minus record playing with Hedman. What I meant by, if they could keep Stamkos, I kind of just meant Connor Sheary's making $2 million and he's sitting in the AHL right now. If they could have moved him and sort of had that cap space, if they could have made it work, it would have been amazing to have, Stamkos sitting on that second line, maybe bumping Nick Paul down to that third line, having even more depth. It would have been great. But like you said, sort of looking at the numbers wise, younger player in Jake Gensel, only $1 million more. So I think they made the right decision there, and it's paying off so far this season. Last storyline on our list, the first place team in the NHL currently, the Winnipeg Jets. Coming off a back-to-back loss, but they are 15-3-0, having an amazing start to their season. Had a great season last season too, but we weren't sold on them as being contenders. This year, with their start, have they sold you on whether they are a true contender to win a Stanley Cup?
Such a tough question, and my logic is if we didn't believe in them last year, which we didn't, why believe in them this year? Hellebuck was having a Vezina caliber year last year, same thing this year. He's played lights out. it's more of the same. Josh Morrissey, great start to the year. And they've got Neil Pionk, too, who's producing on that blue line as well. So they're getting some production from a blue line, which I think is their weak point. And you're led up front, Kyle Connor, having a great year. Mark Scheifele. Like, you've got all the pieces you need to make a run, but it's just Winnipeg. So something just feels off. Like, gentlemen swept out of the first round last year has to be a massive disappointment. Depending on what they do, come closer to the deadline, bring in some rentals and make a run here. Like, why believe in them? So to me, it's, first round, second round exit at best, and it feels awful to say about a team who's 15-3. But I just can't trust them based on their track record.
Yeah, don't feel bad because I'm sitting there with you. No matter how good of a regular season they have, I can't really say in my head, Winnipeg Jets, Stanley Cup champions. I just can't really picture it. And, as good as they've done so far, respect to them. But on paper, they were better last year. They had Tyler Toffoli. They had Sean Monahan. So, again, like you said, whoever they can pick up at the deadline, it could boost that team and maybe change my opinion. But I just don't know what it is. I can't see them being a Stanley Cup champion. They could make it all the way to the Game 7 of the finals. I still wouldn't believe that they are a contender. I hope they prove me wrong, bring it back to Canada, do whatever they have to do, and maybe they see this and this is their fuel to win a cup. But I don't know what it is. I can't picture them being a Stanley Cup winner.
We're going to look real stupid in a Winnipeg Jets Stanley Cup edit in June when they win the cup. But so,
we're going to be in that.
Yeah. So what do you think they do at the deadline? So last year they prioritized forwards. They brought in Monahan, they brought in Toffoli. Do they add to the forward depth again this year, or do they, try to go the defensive route?
Compared to last year, the way Hellebuck just got lit up, I would say maybe, lean to the defensive side. But again, the pieces they lost in the offseason, Monahan, Toffoli, that means that there are holes in the forward core. So I would kind of also lean to the forward. If they could get 1-1, that would be perfect. If they get a solid middle six forward and then, a fourth or fifth, defenseman in that depth chart, I think that would be perfect for them. That's all they really need. I don't know, unless they go out and get Crosby, I can't picture it. I don't know what it is. Prove me wrong, please. Win a cup. Yeah. And the last part of our episode, we're going to go with our top 3 segment. And today we're doing top 3 coaches on the hot seat. Again, very early in the season, but there are some teams who should be a little higher than they are right now, and that in part has to do with the coaches. So first for me, I'm going to go with the Detroit Red Wings and go with Derek Lalonde. Very good assistant coach with Tampa, so I don't want to bash on him too much, but at this point it's been 2 or 3 seasons and they just haven't done, as good as they should on paper. You have very good pieces, you have veterans in Tarasenko and Kane, and then, I don't know how much of that is to blame on him or how much to blame on Yzerman, but I think one of them needs to be moved, or not moved, not that I can trade, but one of them needs to be fired, and I think it just always seems to be the coach that goes first. So yeah, for me, I got Derek Lalonde.
Yeah, he is also on my list. Like you said, what do the Wings have to show in the past 2 seasons, 3 seasons that he has been a coach? And if they don't fire Yzerman, I think it has to be Lalonde. Regardless of if he deserves it or not, I think he'll be on his way out shortly.
That's just a crazy thing. Like, you only get like a 1-2 year leash and then you're just gone. That's just the way that it is at this point. Like, we're talking about, 2 bad seasons, that's it. Like, that's just, I don't know. But next for me, maybe a bit of surprise. I'm going to go with Anaheim. I'm going to go with Greg Cronin. I think that's how you say it. Kind of similar to Detroit in just that they haven't really shown much progression in the past couple of years since he's been head coach. And then there was an article, I think it was Labushkin, that came out and kind of just said that Cronin was kind of just a weird kind of coach, didn't really get much out of his players. And, you kind of look at it and, you have all these issues with Trevor Zegras. You have, other players who haven't fully broken out yet, and you kind of wonder if that is, the coaching problem. But I'm sure there are other coaches higher on that list for, hot seat, on the hot seat. But for me, I think he could be done halfway through the season, maybe the end of the season.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. And when Kenny and I were trying to find coaches for these lists, you look and it shows when the coaches were hired, and a lot of it is like 2024, 2023. Like, it's pretty crazy how short the shelf life is for an NHL head coach. But yeah, shout out Mike Sullivan. He's been the head coach of the Pens since I think like 2015. So, kind of going against what everyone is doing nowadays. But yeah, second coach on my list, very controversial coach. We're going John Tortorella of the Philadelphia Flyers. He ended up scratching Michkov, I think, for 2 games. We did talk about that last episode. But yeah, Michkov came out firing a couple multi-point games in his most recent stretch. But yeah, Philly, I think his time is running out. Not sure how much the players love that John Tortorella intensity and what do the Flyers have to show for it. A young team on the come up for sure. But I don't know if there's a future in Philly for John Tortorella.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's too controversial. I do agree with you. I did consider him for this. I'm not really sure where Philly is as a team right now. They have a couple guys in their prime and obviously a couple young guys. So I'm not sure what is considered a fail for them at this point. But yeah, like you said, he could be on his way out depending on how much the players sort of disagree with his views. Last one for me, maybe controversial. I looked at Barry Trotz and said there's no way he gets fired. I looked at Jared Bednar, no way. Mike Sullivan, no way? Question mark. But I'm gonna go with Jim Montgomery of the Boston Bruins. Obviously, a historic season a couple of years ago, and they've had some playoff success, but not really much to show for it, especially considering the stature of that team and sort of what they strive to do every season. Playing 500 hockey right now is just not good enough for the Boston Bruins, and we always talk about it. If you need a change in your roster, the easiest thing to do is to fire your coach. I just don't see any of those pieces really being moved this early, and I think if something needs to be changed, it's going to be Jim Montgomery.
I agree. He is the 3rd coach on my list as well. And yeah, it's tough. This Bruins team is built to win now, and on paper, they are better than they were last year. So like you said, playing 500 hockey just is not cutting it. It's tough if you're a Bruins fan. You've got Marchand getting up there in age. You have Pasternak in his prime, and now you've locked up Swayman. I think the answers lie within the organization, but to shake things up, I think the coach might have to go. And with how high the temperature is in Boston, Montgomery might be packing his bags up shortly.
But yeah, those are our top 3s. Obviously, the list could go on. There are a lot of other teams who are kind of disappointing right now, and so let us know who you guys have on your list. But I think those are 3 very safe, or 4 total. We have 4 different ones, 4 very safe options. I would assume that the firing starts, within the next couple of weeks. I think that's just the way the NHL works these days.
Do you agree with it? You think coaches should be given a little longer leash, or do you like the short leash?
I mean, it's tough because, you look at the longest serving ones, John Cooper and Mike Sullivan, they've got cups, and they didn't win it in their first or second year, right? Mike Sullivan did, so don't listen to what I'm saying. But like in John Cooper's case, he didn't win it in his first couple of years. He ended up winning it. They persevered. They won it like 6 or 7 years into his tenure. So maybe that's where championships lie. After 5 or 6 years in that coach's tenure. But again, the easiest move to make is to fire your coach. So I guess that makes sense. But I do think a lot of the coaches could be potential Stanley Cup winners. They just need more time. But yeah, guys, that is our episode. A lot of big historic moments going on. McDavid, Vasilevsky, hopefully Ovi maybe this season. But the season's been full of big storylines, and we're happy to report it to you guys. Yeah, until next episode, we'll see you guys soon.
They will gun you down. Oh, she wild inside emoji. Oh, you got a